Hello everyone, and welcome to our group's presentation going over Japan labor laws. In this presentation, we will also be talking about the changes in the economy, both the good and bad, the workforce from a managerial perspective, as well as the employment point of view, Japan's demographics, including the people, population, ethnicity, and areas Japan oversees. We will definitely discuss the labor laws affiliated with Japan's democracy. All of this will be elaborated by myself, Eric Pena, Angelica Gamboa, Anika Nieto, Jessica Collin, Deleth Walker, and Joseph Freitag. We all hope you enjoy this video and learn some valuable information about Japan. Hey everyone, and in this slide I will be going over some common associations people think of when they think of Japan and its culture. First is the beautiful landscaping it has behind this beautiful country it embraces. Second is the many ancient architectural buildings the city embraces with its meticulous attention to detail. Third is the vast delicacies it announces, from sushis and teas to the many qualities of seafood that it displays. Fourth is the well-known types of activities involving sumo wrestling, samurais, and ninja fighting. And lastly is the progression towards technology at such a rapid pace. Now I'm going to go over a little bit about the history of Japan. Research shows that the history of Japan, being hunters, dates back as far as 100,000 years ago. About 34,000 years ago, knife-type tools were found to be brought from the northern China to the Japan Islands as the Japanese people perfected the tools for hunting expeditions. These people were also known for their crafty abilities and building skills displayed by their artistic temples they have constructed. The Japanese were not only skillful with building tools, they were also good with the tools of weaponry. Japan has samurais around since 1185 to 1868. Sadly, British Broadcasting News writes that samurais are tools of a dying art, meaning that samurais and ninjas are few to none left in the nation. The Japanese also cherish traditions and hold traditions wholeheartedly with honor and respect. Continuing with the history of Japan, Japan has always been a nation of advancement and steady innovation. Even today, Japan is ranked as number 13 amongst 132 economies featured in Global Innovation Index for its innovative capabilities. From doyouknowjapan.com, the author writes, as early as the 1900s, Japan was known as the great world powers in the 19th century. In addition, Japan was deemed with its highest economic growth in the mid-1900s. Now I'm going to let my fellow team member, Deleth, tell you a little bit about the demographics of Japan and their economy.
Thank you for the introduction. I would like to discuss some up-to-date demographic information in Japan. The population of Japan decreased for 4 years in a row to 127.1 million as of October 1st, 2014. The National Institute of Population and Social Security Research predicts the size of the population will continue to decrease to 99.1 million by 2048 and 86.7 million by 2060. Ethnicity in Japan. Japan is mainly populated by Japanese people. During the period of 1603 and 1867, there was a populace into 4 classes: warrior, farmer, craftsman, and merchant. with the peer class above and an outcast class below. 98.1% of the ethnicity in Japan are Japanese people. 0.5% are Chinese people, 0.4% are Korean, 1% are Filipino, Vietnamese, and Brazilian people. The demographic information for employment and income in Japan. Japan's employment rate is projected to trend around 61% in 2023 and 62% in 2024. The employment rate measures the number of people who have a job as a percentage of the working age population. The unemployment rate is measured by the number of people actively looking for a job. That percentage is 2.8% as of 2022. The demographic information for the marriage rate and birth and death rates consist of the marriage rate is 58.9% of Japan's adult population is married, 13.9% of women, and 3.1% of men are widowed. 5.9% of women and 3.8% of men are divorced. The birth and death rates are 2,870 live births average per day, 3,469 deaths average per day. To continue the discussion of the demographic information in Japan, there are about 80% of the people living in Japan were born after the end of the World War II. 1 out of 8 people living in Japan are at least 75 years old. Ages 65 and older populate Japan twice as much as the number of children that are under the age of 15. The population of Tokyo increased in the areas of the metropolitan to 0.7% to 134.4%. There are 60,000 centenarians in Japan. 52,000 of them are women. Now that the demographic information has been addressed, I would like to introduce Angelica Gamboa to cover the labor laws and the good changes in the economy.
Hi guys, let's discuss labor laws. In 2018, the new work reform legislation was passed, which would make significant revisions to Japan's labor laws. Most of the amendments took effect in April 2019. So the major changes to Japan's labor laws were equal pay for equal employees, maximum overtime limit, highly skilled professional exemption, and annual leave. To get more into those four, equal pay for equal employees was in regards to what they call regular employees and irregular employees. Regular employees are employees with open-ended term employment relationships, and then irregular employees are those that are part-time, limited workers, and dispatch workers. Basically, they were going to be making the pay between those two this equal, and so this amendment is to clarify the prohibition and unjustified differences in composition and benefits. The maximum overtime limit consisted of 2 rules, the basic limit rule and the extended limit rule. The basic limit rule was working hours exceeding 8 hours per day or 40 hours per week cannot exceed 45 hours per month and 360 hours per year. The extended limit rule is the yearly maximum for overtime work is 720 hours, cannot exceed 100 hours per month for both overtime and statutory, and the average cannot exceed 80 hours per month in the second to 6 months of the rule taking effect. The extension basic rule is only for special circumstances, for instance, anything like unexpected customer complaints or sudden change of product specifications. Highly skilled professional exemption. This is for people that are considered in a high profession, and basically they are exempt from overtime hours or limits And to qualify as a highly skilled person, you have to be in a position where that has a high degree expertise, such as an analyst or consultant. Your job description must clearly identify the scope of your work, and your annual salary must triple the average employee's salary. So basically, a highly skilled professional doesn't get paid for overtime, so they're exempt from it. Annual leave is for just basically a new law that requires employees to take at least 5 days of leave a year if they have more than 10 days of unused leave. Again, Japan's just trying to make sure that, workers out there are having more of that social life and not just overworking themselves. So the positive impact on economy really focused on gender inequality, aging crisis, and the work-life balance. Of course, the work-life balance is in regards to the Kuroshi death and the fact that they knew that they needed to make changes in order to have more of a balance and making sure that employees are not overworked and have more of that healthy lifestyle to do things, which is why they are making sure that the annual leave is in place and that they have that overtime limits in place just to make sure that this doesn't occur again. And then when it comes to the aging crisis and the gender inequality, they were aiming to raise the salary of those employees that are considered irregular to be in par with the regular employees, which this should encourage younger people to accept this type of work, reduce the gender inequality, and stave off some of the aging concerns within the economy.
Hey everyone, I'm going to be addressing the overwork in Japan and how it all began. So it all began in the 1973. Then oil crisis had struck, and this made the country's labor restrictions have forged labor environments where working more than 70 hours per week was okay. It made it seem that it was even normal and honorable to be working this many hours. So many hours made all these people start to feel overwhelmed. And within the 1990s, mostly middle-aged businessmen worked so many hours that would drop dead from a bodily failure or ending their lives rather than returning to the office. Japanese has a word that distinguishes Japanese work culture. It's called karoshi. It also means death from overwork. So Japanese psychologists and researchers studied this cultural phenomenon and see it being a problem that the Ministry of Health was becoming a severe social problem. With the many increase in deaths and suicides, the Japanese government created a helpline run by the National Defense Council for victims of karoshi, which receives between 100 and 300 of karoshi victims and calls each year. A lot of people are afraid to ask for help or reach out, so the government had registered around 200 claims for karoshi. That may be low, but there was an estimate of up to 10,000 deaths annually for karoshi. More than a few years later, the karoshi phenomenon is global. A shared report from the World Health Organization and the International Labor Organization warned that long work shifts increase death from cardiac diseases and strokes. This overwork and work-related strains led to 745,000 deaths in the year 2016. So here are some of Japan's previous working conditions. Japan has some of the longest working hours in the world. A study by Expedia found that Japanese workers on average didn't use their paid vacation days, and 63% of Japanese respondents felt guilty for even using the paid leave. So employees being pressured. They were being pressured by management to regularly put in work off the clock, meaning that they wouldn't even work for getting paid for. And then companies negotiating employees directly so they can work for more than 8 hours a day. So here are some of Kuroshi's falling victims. In the year 2013, a 31-year-old Mio Asado was a journalist who worked 159 hours of overtime just in 1 month before dying of heart failure. In the year 2010, Satoshi, 29-year-old, was a manager at a cement factory. He committed suicide after working 109 hours of overtime just in 1 month. And lastly, 24-year-old Matsuri Takahashi. She was a Japanese advertising, and she jumped to her death from where she lived after working more than 100 hours in just in 1 month. She said, "It was 4 a.m., my body's trembling, I'm going to die, I'm just so tired." So, Japan is changing for the better. A culture challenge still looms. Both Japan's government and its companies say they're now actively trying to reduce working hours in Japan. The government even launched an initiative called Premium Fridays, which encouraged companies to allow their employees to leave at 3 p.m. on the last Friday of the month. The government also considered several initiatives making it mandatory to at least take 5 vacation days and hours being spent at the office. They would also shut down lights to let them know that it's closing time and they can automatically go home.
This slide discusses the evolution of skills in Japan. There are two main causes for the major structural changes: technological advancement and population aging. These factors lead to many jobs being at risk for automation and have contributed to an increase in highly educated labor and a decline in labor supply. An effect of these changes is a significant imbalance in skills. Due to this, there has also been a rise in hiring mismatch, meaning employers are having a hard time finding employees with the right set of skills, and employees are having difficulty finding jobs that match their skills. This graph clearly depicts the jobs that are either at high risk of automation or at risk of significant change. According to this, 16% of jobs in Japan face a risk of automation, while 40% are at risk of significant change. Jobs in Japan face a higher risk than other countries according to the OECD iLibrary, especially when it comes to occupations such as sales and service jobs. As Japan continues to increasingly adopt new technology into the workplace, many companies will face higher risk of automated tasks. This, however, does not mean that people will be out of jobs. If anything, this will lead to the creation of new jobs. This slide discusses the topic of imbalance of skills that Japan is currently dealing with in its workplace. Not only that, but 88% of employers are facing talent shortages. Health service-related jobs are facing the largest shortages, and it has only been increasing. There seems to be a gap between job vacancies and job seekers. In 2019, the job opening ratio reached a high of 1.6. This ratio is calculated by comparing the number of job openings and the number of job seekers. This drastic rise is due to several factors such as economic recovery urging companies to hire and fewer people looking for jobs. Companies are also facing difficulty transferring skills from senior employees to new hires. They claim this has to do with the lack of hiring motivated young and mid-career individuals. This issue is most common in the food and hotel industry and medical and welfare jobs, and it is seen less in the finance and insurance industries. Employment mismatch is exactly what it sounds like: employees being hired for jobs that are either overqualified for or in rare cases underqualified for. According to a survey taken, 46% of employees are working jobs that do not match their field or highest education level. Qualification mismatch is most common in Japan and is often seen in the service industry, and is very low in jobs focused on science, mathematics, and computing. On the other hand, field of study mismatch is most common in employees with a degree in humanities, language and arts, and education. This is an extremely important issue because hiring mismatch means employees' skills are not being utilized to their fullest. This can lead to a decrease in work engagement, a sense of disconnect from one's job, and less motivated individuals. According to an article posted by Ideas, in 2020, employment mismatch accounted for about 15% of the rise of unemployment. As I mentioned earlier, population aging is one of the major structural changes contributing to the supply of skills in Japan, since they have the highest old age dependency. The old age dependency ratio is found by calculating the number of people aged 65 and above per 100 people between the ages of 20 and 64. In 2020, the workforce dependency increased from about 15% to 53%. As you can see in the graph on the right, the projection for the old age dependency ratio in 2050 is as high as 81%. A way that employers can deal with working lives getting longer is to respond with the proper training systems to ensure employees' skills remain relevant. If Japan fails to invest in additional training for the older working population, they will be facing damaging impact on their labor market. Another factor to consider when it comes to having a high old age dependency is that as they get older, these individuals will be demanding certain services such as personal and health care, which only increases the labor shortages that already exist in those fields.
Negative impact on economy. The economy before the new laws went into effect, corporate life was very intense. Some workers worked themselves to death, as stated previously in the handout. And Japan had a common phrase for people who worked themselves to death, and they coined the word karoshi. Intense culture. Where did the intense culture come from? It is a product of Japan's post-war era. The Prime Minister enlisted major corporations to offer their employees lifelong job security, asking only what workers repay them with loyalty. Employees who started working longer in their jobs began to suffer from health effects and in rare cases dying. Employees facing pressure. What kind of pressure were the employees receiving? Employees were being pressured by upper management, making them work off the clock, and negotiating directly with employees to work more than 8 hours. The average workday, how many hours were being put in? Many employees were working 80 hours of overtime per week. Some were exceeding more than 80 plus hours a week of overtime. And due to working so many hours, the trains at night were packed with so many commuters leaving from work. This would happen around midnight and would be a norm. Work-related suicide statistics. Just how many work-related suicides have there been? Just in 2011, there was over 2,689 suicide deaths, and has gradually come down since then. Before the labor laws went into effect in 2018, the suicide death rate was at 2018. Since the labor laws went into effect, the suicide deaths have decreased very slightly. In 2019, the work-related death rate was 1,949, and in 2020, it only went down to 1,918. Not much has changed.